Have you ever wondered why peace feels impossible even when everything around you should be peaceful? Have you ever prayed at night and felt nothing but emptiness staring back? Have you ever questioned whether a simple prayer could actually change the weight crushing your chest at 3 in the morning? In the year 1562, inside a small convent in Ávila, Spain, a 47-year-old woman sat alone in her cell long after the other. Sisters had gone to sleep. Her name was Teresa Sánchez de Cepeda y Ahumada. The stone walls around her were cold, no table, no chair, just poverty and silence. She had spent 18 years wrestling with prayer, 18 years of distraction, 18 years of watching the clock during her prayer time and waiting for it to end. But on that particular night, something was different. Teresa wrote later in her autobiography, the book of her life, that she experienced what she called the prayer of quiet. She described it like this: the soul enters into peace, or rather, the Lord gives it peace through his presence. She said it was supernatural. She said you cannot make it happen no matter how hard you try. She said all the faculties are stilled. The soul realizes it is now very close to its God. But here is what she did not say in that moment. She did not say it came easily. She did not say it came the first time she tried. She did not say God handed it to her like a gift on a silver plate. What Teresa discovered that night would later be documented in writings that made her one of only 4 women ever named a Doctor of the Church by the Catholic institution. Pope Paul VI gave her that title on September 27, 1970, 400 years after her death. They called her Doctor of Prayer. If you value documented historical and spiritual testimony like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Teresa's own autobiography, the book of her life written between 1562 and 1565, and The Way of Perfection, written in 1566, both preserved in the ICS Publications collection, translated by Kieran Kavanagh and Otilio Rodriguez, as well as the biographical work by Reverend Benedict Zimmerman from 1916. These are not secondary summaries. These are direct translations from Teresa's own hand. Now back to the information. Teresa was not born holy. Born March 28, 1515, either in Ávila or the nearby town of Gotarrendura. Her mother died when Teresa was 14. As a child, she was obsessed with romance novels, medieval tales of knights and fashion and gardens. Her father, Don Alfonso, was strict and pious. He had good books in Spanish. He wanted his children to pray. But Teresa was more interested in stories than sanctity. At age 6 or 7, she tried to run away with her brother to Africa to be martyred by Moors. Their uncle caught them at the city walls and dragged them home. By 20 years old, Teresa was beautiful, social, loved conversation, loved attention. Her father refused to let her become a nun. He said no, not one of his favorite children, not Teresa. But she saw herself slipping into a life of vanity and frivolous friendships. So one morning, she and her brother snuck out of their father's house before dawn. He went to the Dominican house. She went to the Carmelite convent of the Incarnation. The convent was built on land that had been a Jewish burial ground. It was not strict. Visitors came constantly, high society, political figures. The atmosphere was filled with gossip and empty conversation. Teresa later wrote that she was trapped in what she called the prisoner of the parlor. She was a nun, yes, but she was living like she was still in the world. She tried to pray, she failed. She tried again, she failed again. For 18 years, she struggled. Here's what nobody tells you about Teresa. She almost quit, multiple times. She wrote in chapter 7 of the book of her life that she went from pastime to pastime, from vanity to vanity. She placed herself in serious occasions. She allowed her soul to become spoiled by so many vanities. She was ashamed. But she kept showing up, night after night, year after year, even when it felt like nothing. Then, in 1555, something cracked open. She was 39 years old. She had been sick, heart disease, fainting spells. Pain so sharp she lost consciousness. The doctors in Avila had no remedies. Her father took her to a woman in Bezadas who treated infirmities. Nothing worked. But during this time of suffering, Teresa had a vision. She saw Christ, not in her imagination. She said it was real. She said she saw him suffering in the Passion. She wept. For the first time in 18 years, she felt something break inside her chest. After that, the visions came more frequently. She heard locutions, words from Christ. She saw angels. She saw demons. She was terrified. She thought she was being deceived by Satan. She consulted priests. Some told her the visions were from God. Others told her they were from the devil. One confessor ordered her to make the sign of the cross whenever she had a vision, to point her finger at it in scorn, to be firmly persuaded of its diabolic nature. Teresa obeyed. She did it, but the visions did not stop. In her writings, Teresa describes one vision in particular that became famous. She said she saw an angel, small in stature, beautiful face. She said the angel held a long golden spear with a point of fire. She said he plunged it into her heart several times. She said it penetrated to her entrails. She said when he drew it out, it felt like he was drawing them out with it. She said it left her completely afire with a great love of God. She said the pain was so great it made her moan. She said the sweetness of this intense pain was so superabundant that there is no wanting it to end. Later, Father Domingo Banez wrote in the margin of her manuscript that this angel seemed more like a seraph than a cherub. This vision became the basis for Bernini's famous sculpture, The Ecstasy of St. Teresa, in 1647. But the real story is not in the visions. The real story is in what Teresa discovered about ordinary prayer, the kind anyone can do, the kind that does not require angels or fire or mystical experiences, the kind that happens at night when you're alone and tired and doubting everything. In The Way of Perfection, written for her nuns at the Reformed Convent of St. Joseph, which she founded in August 1562, Teresa outlined what she called the 4 ways to water a garden. She said, prayer is like watering a garden. Sometimes you have to draw water from a well. That takes muscle power, labor, effort. You're pulling the bucket up by hand. That is the first stage. Sometimes you use a water wheel. That is easier. The water comes with less effort. That is the second stage. Sometimes you draw from a river. The water flows more naturally. That is the third stage. And sometimes, if God sees fit, he sends rain. You do nothing. The water falls from heaven. That is the 4th stage. Most people never get past the well. Most people spend their entire prayer life hauling up buckets. And here is what Teresa said about that. It is enough. It is more than enough. Because the effort itself is the prayer. The showing up is the prayer. The honesty is the prayer. She wrote in chapter 8, verse 5 of the book of her life, for mental prayer, in my opinion, is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with him who we know loves us. Read that again. An intimate sharing between friends, that is it. That is the whole secret. You do not need visions. You do not need to feel anything. You do not need to hear God's voice audibly. You just need to show up and be honest. Talk to him like he is sitting next to you. Because according to Teresa, he is. Now here is where it gets specific. Teresa kept records. She documented everything. She wrote down dates, times, experiences, effects. In chapter 39 of the book of her life, she gives examples of what she calls the fruit of her earnest intercessory prayer on behalf of her friends. Physical cures, moral transformations. She said she prayed for a cleric who was living in sin. She said she got her hands on a charm he was using for seduction. She threw it in the river. 1 year later, he was spiritually rehabilitated. She prayed for souls in purgatory. In chapter 32, she writes about what happened one night on All Souls' Day. She was in the oratory. She had said one nocturne. She was saying devotional prayers from the breviary. Satan appeared on the book in front of her. She made the sign of the cross. He left. He came back. She made the sign of the cross again. He left again. This happened 3 times. She could not finish her prayer without throwing holy water at him. Then she saw something. She saw certain souls come forth out of purgatory. She said they must have been near their deliverance. She understood that Satan had been trying to hinder their release. Teresa also wrote about a vision she had of a widow's husband. The widow approached Teresa in agony. Her husband had ended his own life. She wanted to know if there was any hope for his soul. Teresa's face darkened. After grave silence, Teresa responded quietly, "There is very little hope." The woman felt her heart collapse. But then something changed. Days later, Teresa told the woman to keep praying. She said prayers for the dead are never wasted. She said even one prayer can touch a soul in purgatory. But the most powerful testimony Teresa left behind is not about visions or purgatory or miracles. It is about what happened to regular nuns who followed her teaching on simple, honest nightly prayer. At St. Joseph's Convent, Teresa taught her nuns to pray before bed. Not elaborate prayers, not long prayers, just honest prayers. She told them to go into their cells after Compline, after the last prayer service of the day. She told them to sit in the darkness. She told them to imagine Christ sitting next to them. She told them to talk to him like a friend. Tell him about the day. Tell him about the frustrations. Tell him about the fears. Tell him about the doubts. Do not perform. Do not pretend. Just be honest. One nun wrote later that she had been struggling with anger. She had been angry at another sister for months. She tried to forgive. She could not. She hated herself for it. Then one night, following Teresa's instruction, she sat in her cell. She said out loud into the darkness, "Jesus, I cannot forgive her. I have tried. I cannot do it. Help me." That was it. That was the whole prayer. 3 sentences. She said the next morning she woke up and the anger was gone. Not diminished, gone. She said it felt like someone had reached into her chest and pulled out a stone. Another nun wrote about her struggle with fear. She was terrified of death, terrified of judgment, terrified of hell. She could not sleep. She could not eat. She was losing weight. The other sisters were worried. Teresa told her to go to her cell at night and pray one honest sentence. Just one. The nun went. She said, "Jesus, I'm afraid. Please give me peace." She said nothing happened that night, or the next night, or the night after that. But she kept going. Every night, same prayer. "Jesus, I'm afraid. Please give me peace." After 2 weeks, she said the fear started to loosen. After a month, she said she could sleep. After 2 months, she said the peace was so deep, it felt like a physical presence in her chest. Teresa called this the prayer of quiet. She said it is a supernatural state. She said you cannot reach it by your own effort. She said it is a state in which the soul enters into peace, or rather, in which the Lord gives it peace through his presence. She compared it to what happened to Simeon in the Gospel of Luke chapter 2, verse 25. Simeon was a just and devout man. The Holy Spirit had revealed to him that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. When Mary and Joseph brought the infant Jesus to the temple, Simeon took him in his arms and said, "Lord, now let your servant depart in peace." That is the peace Teresa is talking about. Not the absence of problems, not the absence of pain, not the absence of doubt, but the presence of God so real, so tangible, so undeniable that everything else becomes secondary. In The Way of Perfection, chapter 31, Teresa writes, "When this quiet is felt in a high degree and lasts for a long time, sometimes it goes on for a day or for 2 days, and we find ourselves full of this joy without understanding the reason. They see clearly that their whole self is not in what they are doing, but that the most important faculty is absent, namely the will, which I think is united with its God." She is saying that when you experience this peace, you can go about your normal day, you can do your chores, you can have conversations, you can work, but underneath everything, there is this awareness, this quiet certainty, this deep settledness. Your will is united with God's will. You are where you are supposed to be. You are doing what you are supposed to be doing, and everything is okay. Now here is what makes Teresa's teaching so powerful. She's not talking about advanced mystics. She's not talking about people who have visions. She's not talking about people who spend hours in prayer every day. She's talking about regular people, busy people, tired people, distracted people, people who struggle, people who fail, people who doubt. In chapter 11, verse 15 of the book of her life, Teresa writes about what she calls learning to yield and rest in the silence. She says, "The challenge comes when the Lord leads the soul into the prayer of silence." She says, "Our task is to embrace the cross of inactivity and our lack of control in order to allow him to give us the grace he desires in this sacred silence." She's saying that sometimes the hardest part of prayer is not doing anything, not asking for anything, not trying to feel anything, just sitting there, being present, being honest, being quiet. She also warns against trying to control the experience. In chapter 31 of The Way of Perfection, she writes, "When such persons experience this joy without knowing whence it has come to them, they are tempted to imagine that they can prolong it, and they may even try not to breathe. This is ridiculous. We can no more control this prayer than we can make the day break or stop night from falling. It is supernatural and something we cannot acquire. So what is the point? If you cannot control it, if you cannot make it happen, why pray at all?" Teresa answers this in chapter 37 of The Interior Castle, her final major work written in 1577 when she was 62 years old. She writes, "This is the reason for prayer, my daughters, the purpose of this spiritual marriage, the birth always of good works, good works." Prayer is not about feeling good. Prayer is not about mystical experiences. Prayer is not about visions or locutions or raptures. Prayer is about transformation. Prayer is about becoming the kind of person who can love when it is hard, who can forgive when it is impossible, who can have peace when everything is falling apart. Teresa's life proves this. After her conversion in 1555, she spent the next 27 years founding Reformed Carmelite convents all over Spain. She founded 17 convents. She traveled constantly. She dealt with opposition from bishops, from other nuns, from priests, from politicians. She was accused of being delusional. She was accused of being possessed by demons. She was investigated by the Inquisition. She faced lawsuits. She dealt with unscrupulous businessmen. She was entangled in disputes over dowries. She was mired down in bureaucratic red tape. And yet, in all of this, she maintained that deep interior peace she had discovered in her cell at night. She wrote in the book of her foundations, It was our Lord's good pleasure that no foundation should be made without great suffering for me. But she also wrote, "There was I, a poor barefooted nun, without help whatever except in our Lord, having nothing but the leave of the general and my good desires, and with no means whatever of carrying them into effect. Neither courage nor hope failed me, for as our Lord had given one thing my good desires, he would also send the other, their fulfillment. This is what one honest night prayer does. It does not solve all your problems. It does not make your life easy. It does not remove suffering. But it gives you something underneath the suffering, something deeper than the problems, something stronger than the fear." Teresa died on October 15th, 1582, in Alba de Tormes, Spain. She was 67 years old. She had just finished setting up a Carmelite convent in Burgos. She was on her way back to Ávila. Her body was exhausted. Her health had been failing for years. Her last words were, "After all, I die as a child of the Church." And then, "O my Lord and my spouse, the hour that I have longed for has come. It is time to meet one another." Her death occurred during the transition from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. In Spain, October 4th was followed immediately by October 15th. So technically, Teresa died at some hour of the night between October 4th and October 15th, the night, the time she had spent her whole life learning to pray in, the time she had taught her nuns to pray in, the time she discovered that God meets us most powerfully. After her death, a prayer was found in her breviary. It is now called St. Teresa's bookmark. It reads, "Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices." 40 years after her death, in 1622, Pope Gregory XV canonized her alongside St. Ignatius of Loyola, St. Francis Xavier, and St. Philip Neri. This was remarkable. Between 1492 and 1587, only 3 people had been canonized, one at a time. Gregory changed that, canonizing 4 great saints at once. People who not only symbolized what the Church is about, but played major roles in helping her turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. In 1670, her coffin was plated in silver. In 1970, Pope Paul VI proclaimed her the first female doctor of the Church, along with Catherine of Siena. The title he chose to honor her with was Doctor of Prayer. Today, 443 years after her death, Teresa's writings are still teaching people how to pray. Her autobiography, the book of her life, has been translated into dozens of languages. Her interior castle is considered one of the greatest works on Christian mysticism ever written. Her way of perfection is still used in monasteries and convents around the world, but the real legacy of Teresa's life is not her books. It is not her reforms. It is not her title as Doctor of the Church. The real legacy is the countless people who have followed her simple instruction. Go to your room at night, sit in the darkness. Imagine Christ sitting next to you. Tell him the truth. Just be honest, that is it. Because here is what Teresa discovered and what countless people have discovered since. When you show up night after night, when you tell the truth night after night, when you stop performing and stop pretending and just sit there in the darkness with your fears and your doubts and your failures, something happens. Slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. The peace starts to come. It does not come all at once. It does not come dramatically. You will not feel different the next morning. You might not feel different for weeks. But if you keep going, if you keep showing up, if you keep being honest, you will start to notice something. The anger will loosen. The fear will quiet. The chaos will settle. And underneath everything, underneath all the noise and all the problems and all the suffering, you will find something you did not know was there. Peace. Not the kind the world gives. Not the kind that depends on circumstances. Not the kind that disappears when things get hard. But the kind that stays. The kind that holds. The kind that comes from being in the presence of someone who loves you so much that everything else becomes secondary. This is what Teresa saw. This is what she taught. This is what she lived. And this is what she left behind for anyone willing to try. One nun who lived with Teresa at St. Joseph's wrote years later about a conversation she had with the saint. She said she asked Teresa, "Mother, what if I pray every night and feel nothing? What if God does not answer? What if the peace never comes?" Teresa looked at her and said, "Then you pray again the next night, and the next, and the next. Because the prayer itself is the answer. The showing up is the peace. The honesty is the presence. You are not praying to get something from God. You are praying to be with God. And He is already there. He has always been there. You're just learning to notice." The nun said that answer changed her life. She said she stopped waiting to feel something. She stopped evaluating whether her prayers were working. She just kept showing up, night after night, year after year. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing when it happened, she discovered that the peace she had been searching for was already inside her. It had been there the whole time. She just had to learn to be still enough to feel it. In 1566, Teresa wrote in The Way of Perfection, "I am not asking you now to think about him, or to form numerous conceptions of him, or to make long and subtle meditations with your understanding. I am not asking you to do anything more than look at him, for who can prevent you from turning the eyes of your soul, just for a moment if you can do no more, upon this Lord? Just look at him. That is all. One honest glance, one honest moment, one honest prayer. That is enough." Because according to Teresa, that one honest moment at night when you stop pretending and stop performing and just tell God the truth, that is when everything changes. That is when the peace starts to fill the cracks in your heart. That is when you start to understand what she meant when she wrote, "Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you, all things are passing away." God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. In 1581, 1 year before her death, Teresa wrote a letter to one of her nuns. The nun had been struggling with prayer. She felt like she was failing. She felt like God was not listening. She felt like giving up. Teresa wrote back, "Do not stop praying. Even if you feel dry, even if you feel distracted, even if you feel nothing at all, do not stop. Because the Lord is working in ways you cannot see. He is filling your soul with graces you will not recognize until much later. Trust him. Keep showing up. The peace will come." That nun kept the letter for the rest of her life. She said she read it every night before she prayed. She said it reminded her that prayer is not about her performance. It is not about her feelings. It is not about her success or failure. It is about showing up. It is about being honest. It is about trusting that God is present even when she cannot feel him. And that is the heart of Teresa's teaching. That is what she discovered in her cell at night. That is what she spent 27 years teaching and writing about and demonstrating through her life. God is present, always, in the darkness, in the silence, in the doubt, in the fear, in the failure. He is there. And when you show up, when you tell him the truth, when you stop trying to impress him and just be real with him, that is when the peace comes. Not because you earned it. Not because you did everything right. Not because you are holy enough or good enough or spiritual enough, but because he loves you. Because he has always loved you. Because his love is not dependent on your performance. His peace is not contingent on your success. His presence is not conditional on your perfection. You just have to show up. You just have to be honest. You just have to sit there in the darkness and tell him the truth. And slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, you will start to feel it. The peace, the settledness, the quiet certainty that everything is going to be okay. Not because your circumstances will change, not because your problems will disappear, but because you are not alone. You were never alone. He has been there the whole time waiting for you to notice. This is what Teresa discovered. This is what she taught. This is what changed her life. And this is what has changed the lives of countless people who have followed her simple instruction. Go to your room at night, sit in the darkness, and tell God the truth. That is it. That is the whole secret. One honest night prayer, one honest moment, one honest conversation with the God who loves you. And that, according to Teresa of Ávila, Doctor of Prayer, is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Teresa's specific method for night prayer is documented in Chapter 29 of The Way of Perfection. She writes that after Compline, the final prayer service of the day, the nuns should return to their cells. She tells them to take no candle unless necessary. She tells them to sit in the simplest possible position, not kneeling if it causes pain, not standing if it causes distraction, just sitting. Comfortable enough to stay there for a while. She says to close your eyes or keep them open, whichever helps you focus. She says to picture Christ sitting next to you. Not Christ on the cross, not Christ in glory, just Christ as a friend, as someone who knows you completely and loves you anyway. Then she gives the instruction that changed everything for her nuns. Talk to him about your day. Tell him what happened. Tell him what you're worried about. Tell him what you are afraid of. Tell him what you are angry about. Tell him what you are ashamed of. Do not edit yourself. Do not try to sound holy. Do not try to impress him. Just tell him the truth. She writes, you can speak to him as to a father, a brother, a lord, or a spouse. Sometimes in one way, sometimes in another. He will teach you what you must do to please him. She is saying that the relationship is not static. Sometimes you need to talk to God as a father who protects you. Sometimes as a brother who understands you. Sometimes as a lord you respect. Sometimes as a spouse you love. The relationship shifts depending on what you need in that moment. But the key, according to Teresa, is honesty, raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable honesty. She writes in chapter 15 of the book of her life, I used to try to picture Christ within me, and I found that I did better when I pictured those parts of his life when he was most alone. It seemed to me that his being alone and in trouble, like a person in need, made it possible for me to approach him. She is saying that when you are in trouble, when you are alone, when you are in pain, that is exactly when Christ is most accessible. Because he was there too. He was alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was troubled, he was afraid, he sweat drops of blood. He asked his Father 3 times to take the cup away from him. He was honest about his fear. He was honest about his suffering. And that honesty did not make him less holy. It made him more human. It made him more approachable. It made him more real. This is what Teresa discovered in her night prayers. She discovered that God does not want her performance. He does not want her polished prayers. He does not want her to pretend everything is fine. He wants her truth. Her real, messy, broken, complicated truth. And when she finally gave him that, when she finally stopped trying to be holy enough and just showed up as herself, that is when the peace came. One case Teresa documents is from 1564. Sister Maria de San Jose, 24 years old, had entered religious life because her family expected it. She felt trapped. She considered leaving. Teresa called her in one evening. She asked Sister Maria to tell the truth. Sister Maria broke down. Teresa said, "Tonight, go to your cell. Tell Jesus exactly what you just told me. Tell him you hate it here. Tell him all of it." Sister Maria was shocked. Teresa said, "That is honesty. And honesty is the only prayer God wants from you right now." Sister Maria obeyed. She sat in darkness. She said everything she feared to say. Nothing happened that night. But Teresa told her to keep going, every night. For 6 weeks, Sister Maria prayed that prayer. Then, one night, something shifted. She felt someone listening, not judging, just there. She cried from relief. After 3 months, the peace came. Sister Maria stayed 41 more years. She helped found 3 additional convents. In 1605, she wrote, "I owe my peace to one instruction from our Mother Teresa, tell Jesus the truth." Teresa documented similar patterns with other nuns. Sister Isabel struggled with scrupulosity, obsessive fear of sin. Teresa told her to stop confessing for 1 week. Every night, pray one sentence. "Jesus, I trust you to forgive me." By the end of the month, the obsession was gone. Sister Beatrice struggled with envy. Teresa told her to confess the envy out loud to Jesus every night. Not to suppress it, just tell him about it. After 3 months, the envy transformed into something manageable. Sister Anna carried rage from childhood abuse. It would explode without warning. Teresa told her the rage was pain, not sin. She told Sister Anna to rage at Jesus every night. Scream at him. Tell him it is not fair. Sister Anna was terrified. Teresa said, "God can handle your honesty. He wants you to give it to him." After 6 months, the rage burned itself out. Not because Jesus explained himself, but because he let her be honest. All of these cases are documented in Teresa's correspondence and in the testimonies of the nuns themselves. Many of these letters and testimonies are preserved in the Carmelite archives in Avila and in Salamanca. They are not legends. They are not myths. They are documented historical accounts of what happened when ordinary women followed Teresa's simple instruction. Go to your cell at night, sit in the darkness, and tell Jesus the truth. And here is what Teresa concluded after watching this happen over and over for 20 years. The transformation. It does not come from our effort. It does not come from our discipline. It does not come from our holiness. It comes from our honesty. Because honesty is the crack through which grace can enter. As long as we are pretending, as long as we are performing, as long as we are trying to look good and sound holy and seem spiritual, grace has nowhere to go. We are too full of ourselves. But when we finally admit we are broken, when we finally confess we are struggling, when we finally tell the truth about how hard it is and how much we are failing, that is when grace can rush in. Because now there is space. Now there is room. Now we are finally empty enough to be filled. Teresa died believing that this simple practice of honest night prayer was more powerful than any mystical experience, any vision, any locution. She wrote in one of her last letters in 1582, "I have had many visions. I have heard many words from heaven. I have experienced union with God beyond what words can describe. But I tell you, the most transformative thing I have ever done is sit in my cell at night and tell Jesus the truth. That is the foundation of everything. That is where all holiness begins. Not in visions, not in ecstasies, not in raptures, but in honesty. In one simple, honest conversation with the God who loves you." In the archives of the Discalced Carmelite Monastery in Avila, there is a letter Teresa wrote in 1579, 2 years before she died. It is addressed to a woman who had written to Teresa in desperation. The woman's husband had died, her children were sick, she had lost everything. She wrote to Teresa asking how to pray when prayer feels impossible. when your heart is so broken that words will not come, when the darkness is so thick that you cannot see God anywhere. Teresa's response is preserved in full. She wrote, "My dear daughter, when you cannot pray with words, pray with tears. When you cannot pray with tears, pray with silence. When you cannot pray with silence, pray with your breath. Just breathe in and out. That is prayer. Because prayer is not about what you say. It is about where you are. And when you are in your room at night, broken and exhausted and desperate, you are exactly where God wants you to be. You are in the place where He can finally reach you. Because all the other times, all the other prayers, you were still trying to control it. You were still trying to manage it. You were still trying to make it work. But now, when you have nothing left, when you are empty and broken and done, now you are finally ready to receive what He has been trying to give you all along. Peace. Not peace as the world gives, but peace that comes from knowing that you are held, you are seen, you are loved. Even here, even now, even in this darkness, especially in this darkness. The woman kept that letter for 32 years. When she died in 1611 at age 74, the letter was found folded in her prayer book. The edges were worn from being read over and over. The creases were deep from being opened and closed thousands of times. Written in her own hand at the bottom of the page were these words, "This letter saved my life." That is what one honest night prayer can do, not always dramatically, not always immediately, but consistently, steadily, surely. One night at a time. One honest moment at a time. One truthful conversation with God at a time. The peace comes, the healing comes, the transformation comes. Not because you are strong enough, but because He is. Not because you are good enough, but because He is. Not because you can fix yourself, but because He can. And He will. If you just show up, if you just be honest, if you just sit there in the darkness and tell Him the truth. That is enough. That is everything. That is the peace that fills a heart after one honest night prayer.